It's time, Fort Wayne. Your sports, your station. It's the Sports Rush with Brett Rump.
Max Landis.
Covering all the topics that hit a nerve here in the Summit City.
Clark goes 11 yards, touchdown.
Only on 1380 The Fan and 100.9 FM. Now here's your host, Brett Rump.
The greatest, most interesting, most important person of all time.
You are incredible.
Older than one.
Yeah, well, you're half right.
What is this, amateur hour?
This is going to be huge.
I believe this is going to be our finest hour.
Just when I think you've said the stupidest thing ever, you keep talking.
I think that's the worst thing I've ever heard.
That boy ain't right.
The simplest way to put it, I have problems.
Welcome to the alleged show.
Y'all ready for this?
Thank God it's...
It's Friday, gotta get down on
Friday. You can put the work away. The first full work week of 2025 is in the books. Time to slide into a sports weekend. I don't know if I should use that term, but it might be kind of literal more than figurative. Welcome to the Sports Rush, your daily local sports fix 4 to 6. Brett Rump with Adam Lundy. Glad to have you on board with us. Our Parkview Sports Medicine text line 260-447-8500. We're talking about the Ohio State Texas game coming up tonight. The winner to face Notre Dame for the national title on January 20th. That is a week from Monday. Got a couple of score predictions. In fact, it sounds like everybody seems to be heading on Ohio State side.
Yeah, somebody on the text line 260-447-8500. said they feel like 38-28 OSU tonight to me, and the Irish are going to have their hands full. Ryan also weighing in on Twitter. He said 28-24 OSU.
And we'll make our picks coming up a little bit later in this hour. We'll also talk about the game with Kyle Rowland from the Toledo Blade, former Fort Wayne sports writer from, I bet it's been 12 to 15 years ago. He's been in Toledo for a while, and he covers both the Michigan Wolverines and Ohio State Buckeyes. Boy, that's got to be an awkward position to be in. But with Toledo being kind of between both, it's actually much closer to Ann Arbor, but it's part of Ohio, and once you get into the state of Ohio, you're not supposed to recognize that there is a state to the north. But Kyle Rowland will talk about the Ohio State Buckeyes matchup against Texas coming up tonight. He'll join us coming up in about 15 minutes. Also, Pacers with a tough game tonight, and a couple of tough games will follow after they get done with their game tonight. We'll talk about their upcoming schedule through the rest of January coming up before we wrap things up at 6 o'clock. A reminder that tonight we've got high school basketball. It's the Parkview Sports Medicine High School Basketball Game of the Week as the Southside Archers visit the Homestead Spartans. This is a Southside team that's kind of surprised us. It's a young roster, a lot of sophomores, and J.J. Foster's done a terrific job getting them off to a great start. And they will be at Homestead tonight, SAC action. You've got... the Homestead Spartans come in tonight with a 1-1 conference mark, 8-4 overall, while Southside is 8-2 with a 2-1 Summit Athletic Conference record. That tip should be somewhere around 7:45, so expect us on the air somewhere between 7:35 and 7:40. And then high school basketball will finish. We'll head over to the Coventry Pizza Hut for our Parkview Sports Medicine High School Basketball post-game show. Scores, highlights, analysis. I don't know. We'll try to slip in a coach's interview if we can get that done tonight. But also we will be following in real time the Ohio State-Texas game during the course of our show tonight. So, if you go home and you just decide to plant by your fireplace and veg out tonight, take your computer and log in on 1380thefan.com, and you can always stream our radio station for free. No sign-up required, 1380thefan.com. And if you haven't done so already on your mobile, you might want to get our app.
You got to get the app.
Got to have the app.
Yeah.
You're not in with the cool kids if you don't have the app.
No, stream us wherever, and I think we'll also make an effort to get on maybe Facebook Live tonight at Pizza Hut.
Oh, okay, there you go.
We'll see.
So if you're not watching the game that closely, you can watch us.
Yeah. Better looking.
Absolutely. As long as we keep the camera off Doot.
Oh, don't do Doot like that.
Yeah, Doot's the only one's not here. That's why it's easy to pick on him. But anyway, 260-447-8500 is our Parkview Sports Medicine text line. Quick recap, give you real quick the games that we have heard from. And if there's any others that we're missing, please let us know. But we did get confirmation that the Southside Homestead girls-boys basketball doubleheader tonight is being played. That actually was not announced as a postponement. That was announced as a confirmation that the game is on as scheduled, or the games are on as scheduled at Homestead. You also, in the SAC, have Dwenger at Carroll, Lures at Concordia, Snyder at Northrop, and Wayne at Northside. In the NE8 girls, just one game will be played tonight. And last we heard, Belmont at Columbia City is still on in Columbia City. That is a showdown of the two top teams in the NE8. Leo at Norwell and New Haven at DeKalb, both postponed. Then you go to the ACAC girls basketball. Adams Central Heritage has been postponed. Again, Adams Central at Heritage postponed tonight, but no report on Jay County at Bluffton, Southern Wells at South Adams. And the only postponement we are aware of in the NECC girls basketball tonight is Fairfield Eastside. That game has been postponed. Over on the boys' side, there was one game scheduled in the NE8. That is Huntington Northeast Noble, and that game has been postponed. And Fairfield Eastside postponed on the boys' side tonight as well. All right, got it all caught up.
Yep, as of now, that's it.
Last night, big win for Maria Marcasano and the women's basketball team at Purdue Fort Wayne. They are now a perfect 7-0 in the Horizon League. 7-0 at home this season. The men and women have combined to go 15-0 on their home floor.
Man, talk about defend the fort.
Yeah, definitely. And so up next for both programs, the men will be at home coming up tomorrow night. They'll take on Detroit Mercy, who got the best of the Dons. And in hindsight, kind of a bad loss.
Yeah, definitely.
It was a 1-point, last-second loss. Dons had the lead through almost the entire contest, but Detroit chipped away, got a chance, and then hit the Dons missed a couple of free throws, and what do you know? The doors open, and Detroit busts through. They hit a three-pointer with just 3 seconds on the clock, and they end up winning it by a point over the Mastodons up at Detroit. So it's the second meeting this year between Purdue Fort Wayne and Detroit Mercy. That's tomorrow night at the Coliseum at 7 p.m. Big one for the women. They're on the road against the preseason favorites. So it's a battle of the team currently in first against the team that is only, one game behind, and a team in Cleveland State that was the preseason pick to win the conference. So a showdown in Cleveland.
Two great matchups.
That'll be Sunday, by the way.
Okay. Two great matchups for the Dons this weekend, both the women and the men. But like you said, I think the Dons should be able to beat this Detroit Titans team. It's a team they should beat, a game they should win tomorrow. I don't know if you saw, but
they got smoked
last night.
IU
Indy defeated them 95-61.
And it was not that close.
Nope.
It was actually a 45-point game or something when I checked it out at first. And then Detroit had a little bit of a run to close the margin into the 30s before the game ended. But yeah, they got beat bad, and they played last night without their best player.
Okay.
And he is from what I understand, going to be a game-time decision, nursing a sore ankle.
Something to keep an eye on.
So we don't know if he's going to play here, but that did have some impact on the game. But big win for IU Indy over Detroit Mercy last night before Detroit made the trip into Fort Wayne today, and then tomorrow we'll take on the Mastodons. 260-447-8500. We're asking your score tonight for Ohio State, Texas. Who's going to win? What's the score going to be? Most of the scores that we have gotten so far do favor Ohio State, and I think most people expect this to be a little more of an offensive game than what was expected from Notre Dame Penn State. But Notre Dame Penn State was very defensive up until the fourth quarter, and then it became almost like a ping pong match. It was like back and forth, a couple of explosive plays. What a touchdown by Jeremiah Love last night.
Very impressive.
And once again, everybody's talking about the big field goal with 7 seconds left being the difference in the game. But I will argue that perhaps the biggest 3 points were the 3 that Notre Dame scored just before halftime, when they had Steve Angeli, who had to come off the bench cold and take over for an injured Riley Leonard. And the injury was concussion protocol, which he obviously passed because he came back and played the second half. But the fact that the backup quarterback came in, because generally your backup comes in and it's like a 3 and out, or you don't move the ball. They actually had a scoring drive late in that first half that made it a 1-score game. I think that was huge psychologically for Notre Dame because they knew they got the ball first to start the second half, and all they would have to do is get it into the end zone with that second half drive, and we'd be all knotted up. New ball game, right? After a 10-0 Penn State start. That's exactly what Notre Dame did. So those 3 points to me, huge for Notre Dame. And they did it with a backup quarterback. So if you ask me, MVP of the game might have been Steve Angeli.
There you go. Another text just rolled in on the text line 260-447-8500 with their score prediction. They're going with a big Ohio State win, 33-17.
Wow.
16-point victory there.
You know, the tough thing with picking Ohio State big is their ceiling is to dominate because they have the most elite talent in college football. That's the most talented roster, especially when you look at skill positions. I think overall, when you look at Smith and you look at Henderson out of the backfield, I mean, they've got some elite guys. Ibuka, I mean, you've got guys that are elite at wide receiver, at running back. And Will Howard, kind of mixed reviews. To me, it's kind of like Riley Leonard. You can't argue against the wins and losses, but has he been great? I don't know. Has he been good? Yeah. I mean, he's been good. But he's got so much talent around him. Does he not get the credit he deserves? That's the other question. But, you've got guys like Jeremiah Smith, the freshman, that wouldn't have had the season he had if he didn't have a quarterback that was finding him and getting him the ball in a catchable place. But bottom line, I think Ohio State just has too many weapons. Texas has weapons. But, to me, Quinn Ewers is basically an older version of Drew Aller. And so I can't ride with him, but I'll make my pick later.
All right, another text rolling in.
Official pick.
Another text rolling in. It's from Mr. Vegas. He says, Brett, good call on the over last night. He's got Ohio State 28-24 over Texas tonight. And then should they both options for the teams if they play Notre Dame. Ohio State -8, 8.5, and Texas would be -3, 3.5 over Notre Dame.
Yeah, it's interesting that tonight's winner is going to be a decent favorite over Notre Dame.
Yeah, at least 3.
And I wonder what the over-unders will be because I think Texas and Ohio State are perceived as higher-scoring offenses. Notre Dame, I think, is perceived as more of a running team that's going to play defense. So it'll be, I don't know what the over-unders are going to be.
Yeah.
We got to get a break in, and we've got to talk to Kyle Rowland from the Toledo Blade about this game tonight. Texas, Ohio State. We'll do that when we return. It's the Sports Rush on 1380 The Fan and 100.9 FM. Welcome back to the Sports Rush Daily Local Sports Fix 4 to 6. I am Brett Rump along with Adam Lundy. And coming up tonight, weather won't be a concern in this one. It is going to be Ohio State and Texas Cotton Bowl. And the winner will go on to take on Notre Dame in the national championship game. And a guy who covers the Ohio State Buckeyes from the Toledo Blade, used to be a Fort Wayne sports reporter, is joining us right now on our guest line. It's Kyle Rowland. Kyle, are you in Dallas covering the game or just following from Toledo?
Actually, I'm not in Dallas. I was at the Rose Bowl, and I'll be at the national title game, but I'm not on site this weekend.
Yeah, Dallas, if you got to skip one, Dallas is really the one to skip. It gets colder in Dallas than it does at the Rose Bowl. Atlanta, I guess, would be it could be cold in Atlanta. But anyway, let's talk about Ohio State, where they're at as far as going into this game tonight. First of all, I want to go back to the loss to Michigan and what that did for the psyche of Ohio State, because you really feel like there could have been two ways for this team to respond. They could have shattered confidence. They could, be sometimes it reveals some chemistry issues or culture issues in the locker room. If there's anybody that doesn't get along with somebody, they get frustrated and things break out. How did Ohio State handle that, and did they use it as motivation going into the college football playoffs?
They definitely have. I mean, it's pretty remarkable, really. I mean, Michigan in two different ways has kind of spurred Ohio State to this potential national championship. The first thing was last year, just Michigan winning the title. I mean, it prompted a lot of Ohio State guys to stay. It prompted Ohio State's boosters to pony up and get a $20 million roster. And then Michigan beating Ohio State for the fourth consecutive year in November. In just a shocking display. It was a home game. Michigan was not very good this year. It was the biggest spread in the history of the series, and Ohio State just laid as big an egg as you've ever seen. And the fans reacted accordingly, as you would expect a rabid fan base to. I mean, Ryan Day was firmly on the hot seat going into that Tennessee game. They get up 21-0 in that game, and they've been, on a roll ever since, 34-0 in the Rose Bowl against Oregon. And it's unbelievable, really, just how the switch has flipped. This is the team, I guess, everyone thought Ohio State would have. I mean, the regular season, as talented as they are, and I think most people would probably say they're the most talented team in the country, they just really weren't ever that impressive in the regular season. I mean, the Oregon game may have been their best game, and they lost that game. Indiana was impressive at times, but Indiana kind of handed them some big plays in that game. Offense still didn't really play that well. Obviously, the Michigan game was a disaster. But there was a fire that was lit for sure in the week after that Michigan game. And this team came together, and they've proven a lot of people wrong. I mean, the interesting thing, too, is in these losses to Michigan, Ohio State has responded well under Ryan Day. I mean, one year they had, just this unbelievable Rose Bowl win against Utah where the offense went off. They almost beat Georgia and played, their best game of the year. And if Marvin Harrison doesn't get hurt in that game, they probably win that, and then beat TCU and won the national title. And then last year, they had a bunch of opt-outs and lost the Cotton Bowl, so I don't really know how much you count that. But they've responded well in these losses to Michigan.
It's interesting when you look at Ohio State's roster, and you talked about that $20 million roster, and that's the reported NIL totals that Ohio State spent. And I thought Kirk Herbstreit made a good point yesterday when he said they didn't go out and buy a roster. What they did was they used the money to retain some of the elite talent that they already had on their roster. Yes, they got a couple of guys to come in, but all in all, this is a fairly intact roster. You went back and were talking about last year. This is a lot of the same roster for Ohio State from a year ago.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, it wasn't a team like Indiana flipped their roster. I mean, they also had a new coach, and some other programs, kind of flip the roster, year to year. I mean, that certainly wasn't the case with Ohio State. I mean, they do have a new quarterback from Kansas State, but yeah, like you say, I mean, most of the guys that came back were guys that were going to be, first, second, third round draft picks last year. I mean, it's in this era now. I mean, that's easier to do. I mean, Michigan the year before, did it with several players. It's just, anyone you talk to that's played football, I mean, they all kind of say, college was the best, and, it becomes a business then once you're in the NFL, and kind of stay in college as long as you can. And now that's possible because the money is so good in college football.
For the Buckeyes, when you look at their consistency or their inconsistency, I guess, offensively, I feel like they've got the best weapons in the country. What is it that makes them vulnerable to have that Michigan game? What goes wrong? What doesn't click? It's like having like an 8-cylinder, big hog engine, and then all of a sudden you can't get it to go above 30 on the highway. What happens to Ohio State offensively that they could struggle?
Yeah, I think it's kind of multifaceted. I mean, despite having Jeremiah Smith, who some people say would be the number one pick in the NFL draft, which is just incredible as a freshman, Will Howard isn't the most consistent quarterback at times. So I think that could be a problem. The offensive line, I'd say, is the biggest weakness. They played great these last few games. But they have guys out with season-ending injuries. They've had to shift guys around. Some backups are now playing starter minutes. I'd say that's, the biggest weakness. Maybe Travion Henderson doesn't get as many yards or doesn't live up to the talent sometimes. But honestly, I think a lot of it is almost emotional, psychological thing where if they start fast, look out. And if they don't, sometimes it builds with the players, it builds with the coaching staff, just kind of the pressure. But the Tennessee and the Oregon game, it was just all systems go, from the outset. And I think Ohio State a lot of times, like when I watch games, I kind of, I'll make a preseason or pregame prediction of what I think will happen. And then I always say, I'll reassess at halftime. In these Ohio State games, a lot of times you really can tell in, the first quarter or the first few possessions of, how is their offense playing? And if it's on, then it's going to be a major problem for the opponent the rest of the game. So if they're up, 14-7, 10-0 or something tonight, I don't think Texas will win.
It's interesting when you bring that up because, I don't know how to explain the psyche of an athlete, that a skilled athlete, how they can take their game to another level when they feel good about themselves, but when they're doubting themselves or they're frustrated. And I think that's the biggest thing. Great athletes don't necessarily get down. They get frustrated because everything up to this point in their life has come easy to them. And all of a sudden you start to get a little frustrated. That's why I was talking about, locker room issues, because sometimes that's where it comes out. Everybody wants to vent because they got some frustration built up. Ohio State seems to have used it for positive energy so far based on the first two performances. Tonight, in your assessment of this game, Kyle, what type of game do you see? Is all these skill players, are they going to be able to make plays against the other team's defense? Is this going to be a defensive battle? What kind of game do you expect?
Yeah, it's interesting. I almost kind of think Texas is like a poor man's Ohio State. For several reasons. Number one, they have a lot of NFL talent on their roster. But they just haven't put it together this season. I don't know. I have not been overly impressed by Texas. Quinn Ewers was playing pretty well earlier in the year, but ever since he was injured and came back, he just really hasn't been that great. I expect Ohio State to win. I think that they could definitely win big. I think more of the same. Texas's defense will certainly challenge Ohio State. I think it's better than Tennessee and Oregon. Especially the Texas D-line is really good. They need to do something early. Letting Ohio State get into a rhythm is not an ideal, formula to win. So you got to get after Will Howard. I think you got to pressure him, get him out of sorts, maybe create some turnovers. I don't know if Texas can win if Ohio State has 0 turnovers. But I don't know. I'm thinking like 34-24, 34-21, Ohio State, something around there.
We were pretty close. I called it 34-27. So, we're on the same page. Kyle, always appreciate you jumping on with us. It'll be fun if we end up with a Notre Dame-Ohio State national championship, because here in Fort Wayne, we're kind of stuck right in between the two. By the way, that brings up one more question for you, Kyle. Those would be the two teams that beat Indiana this year. There was a lot of buzz and a lot of debate on whether Indiana deserved a spot in the field. What were your thoughts?
Yeah, I think they absolutely deserved it. I was a huge Indiana supporter. I love Cignetti. I was definitely flying the IU flag this year. I just think, the people that had things to say about Indiana, I understand some of it. The schedule was easy. They didn't necessarily rack up, impressive wins. But, man, when you're 11-1 in the Big Ten, I mean, that just has to matter. It just the results have to matter. And I think it's played out. Alabama did not belong in. South Carolina did not belong in. I mean, Ole Miss lost to Kentucky. I mean, the way I always said it, after the first round of the playoffs, like, if Indiana had lost to, Washington and Nebraska, they wouldn't be in the playoff, just like Alabama lost to Oklahoma.
Right.
And Kentucky beat Ole Miss. And South Carolina, lost 3 games. So, like, one team took care of business, the other didn't. So I don't really see where the outrage is.
Well, and of course, these college schedules are made so long in advance, so you don't know what you're supposed to be scheduling for a non-conference schedule. Of course, with Indiana's history, yes, it was a weaker non-conference schedule, but they needed it to be. That's just you gotta find your wins where you can get them. And then it was a brand name thing. I mean, that's all it was. If Ohio State or Michigan had the same schedule as Indiana, no one would have said a word. But their name's Indiana, and they've never been good, so that's why people had complaints. Yeah, and the people who are really passionate in football are the SEC fans, and I think in some ways they're kind of pandering to the SEC crowd when the national talking heads make that point. But, yeah, I'm with you. I think Indiana certainly proved that they deserve to be in at the time, and I think that's been validated with the results that we've seen here in the postseason. Kyle, appreciate it. Have a great time watching the game, and hopefully you've got something to write about coming up on January 20th.
All right, sounds great. Thanks a lot.
Yep, thanks, Kyle. That's Kyle Rowland from the Toledo Blade, former sports writer here in Fort Wayne. Does a great job. From Toledo, they send him north, they send him south. So sometimes he's covering Michigan, sometimes it's Ohio State. What a life. The guy got to cover the national championship game a year ago because Michigan was in it. Now this year he's got another chance to go cover the national championship game because Ohio State might make it.
Not a bad spot to be in at all. No. Although it's kind of like how Fort Wayne's right kind of in between South Bend and Columbus.
Well,
we host?
Dillonson had 2 chances.
Dillonson did have 2 chances.
If Indiana could have run through the playoffs or Notre Dame, 2 chances.
Gotta increase your chances however you can because this is going to be a good game.
We may have to talk to Judge Phil and see if things ever change, Judge. Would you consider the Fighting Hoosier preview?
I kind of doubt it, but you never know.
No, we got Griff on the Hoosiers.
Yeah, we do.
All right, 260-447-8500, the Parkview Sports Medicine text line, 260-447-8500. Pacers with a big one tonight. We'll talk about that and more when we return. It's the Sports Rush on 1380 The Fan and 100.9 FM. Welcome back to the Sports Rush, your daily local sports fix, 4 to 6. Snowy night. It's just one of those nights. If you're going to be out, be very careful and make sure you give yourself plenty of braking distance because that's where things seem to sneak up on you. When you're driving along and you think things are okay, and then you go to put on the brakes and surprise!
Look out.
Yeah, so, and show courtesy to the other drivers. There may be some that will be driving slower than you prefer, but don't go blow them off the road by trying to make a dangerous pass or something. That's the thing that's most annoying to me is that you've got the impatience with the overly cautious, and the combination of those on the road just often doesn't mix. So be careful out there on the roads tonight.
You know what it always is? It's the guys with the 4-wheelers, the 4x4s, the trucks. Yeah. They're raring to go, and they're right behind a sedan that's trying not to slide off the road.
Here's the worst one. I used to travel quite a bit, driving my car a lot during the winter. Here's the most frustrating thing is when you're in a fairly steady or heavy snowfall, and the plows aren't keeping up on the interstate, and you're cruising along, just hoping you don't lose it, right?
Right.
And then all of a sudden, the trucks decide they're not slowing down for anybody. So they get into a second lane, which you don't even know if there is a second lane because you can't see the lanes, right?
Right.
And so you're trying to go as far right as you feel you safely can to get out of their way. And then they blow by you. And what happens is all that, I don't know, is that a backwash? What is that? What do they call that?
Ooh,
you know how
yeah,
they carve through the snow and it sprays into your lane?
The kickback? Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, because what it does is it hits you, and then it causes you to kind of fishtail a little bit, and then you feel like you're going to lose it. And, it's just – and so be safe. Be safe, be courteous, and, don't feel like you've got to race somebody home. There's plenty of time to get home tonight. Most of you aren't going to be working tomorrow. It's much better to have it tomorrow and get home safely.
Yeah, it's all about that following space, people. Just keep that in mind, that following space.
Yes. Hey, big game tonight for the Pacers. They're going to be taking on the Golden State Warriors. That game down in Indianapolis. It has a 7 o'clock tip. And, the Pacers took care of business this week. That was the big question.
Yeah.
Could they beat teams they're supposed to beat? Because they've got a couple of losses to Charlotte. Who's the other bad team they've lost twice to this year? Brooklyn. They lost to Brooklyn.
I don't know if it's twice, but they did lose to them.
Yeah, they've lost to a couple of bad teams twice this year already. But they beat Brooklyn this week, and they beat the Bulls. And Thomas Bryant's been a big part of the reason why. And it's going to get interesting because after the season's over, both Thomas Bryant and Miles Turner are scheduled to be free agents. So what do you do if you're the Indiana Pacers?
That's the thing. Is it time to re-sign Miles Turner? I know you're thrilled to get him back and locked down for a long contract here in Indiana with the Pacers.
Well, and the question is, knowing is at the end of the contract year, is he somebody that you can cash in and get top value right now, like mid-season because somebody wants to have him for a stretch run?
Mm-hmm.
And the reason I bring it up is because I think one of the teams that he might fit with, if they're looking for a landing spot, could possibly be the team they're playing tonight.
Interesting, yeah.
The Golden State Warriors.
That would be an interesting
They
fit.
love, floor spacers.
Yeah.
You've got Trace Jackson-Davis, not necessarily known for his three. Him and Miles Turner would probably be complementary fits at the 5. So I don't know what the Pacers are going to do. Is Miles Turner one of those pieces that you think if they do make a trade and they go to more of a traditional center and Thomas Bryant, although what Thomas Bryant's doing is anything far from traditional. He's been hitting threes, too.
Yeah, I mean, his last game he was 2 for 4, 50% from behind the arc. So, yeah.
And so I don't know if you lose a little bit of depth, but you'll get that depth back next year when the injuries return. But I don't know. Give us your thoughts on the Parkview Sports Medicine text line, 260-447-8500. But for the Pacers, it kind of starts a tough streak. They've got the Warriors tonight, and then they've got back-to-back games against the Cleveland Cavaliers.
Yeah, but I'll tell you what, there is a large list of injuries tonight for the Golden State Warriors. I can tell you already that Steph Curry is not going to be playing.
Really?
Yes, he is out for tonight's game, along with Draymond Green and their second-year guy, Brandon Podemski. Trace Jackson-Davis, also a game-time decision with an eye contusion.
Really?
Yeah.
What's with Steph?
Let me check here. Steph
He stubbed his toe on the hotel bed.
He has been ruled out for tonight's game against Indiana due to bilateral knee injury management.
Okay. So he's resting.
Yeah, he's sitting.
Who do they play tomorrow?
I'll take a look here for you.
It must be a back-to-back, I would think.
Pulling up that old schedule.
Is it how offensive do you think it is for NBA players now that this has become so customary that when a team decides to rest their star? DC used to go down to the Pacers games when he was producing this show.
Mm-hmm.
And, of course, he'll be in tomorrow with Jim Shevlin talking sports tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. Yeah, right here. But DC used to go down to, and he would buy like 2 games a year, and usually it's like to go see LeBron and go see Steph, right? And it was uncanny the number of times that Steph Curry did not play. I think he went down there 4 or 5 times. I think once Steph Curry actually played. I don't know why he doesn't want to play against Indiana.
I guess he just doesn't like it, but I can tell you that they don't play again until Monday, the Warriors do.
Huh. And did they play yesterday?
They did play last night.
That's what it is.
It's the second of the back-to-back.
Did he play last night?
I'll double check.
Because I don't tell if it's an injury or if it's, truly a rest day after.
He played last night.
Yeah, so that's
36 minutes.
He played a regular night last night. Tonight's the night they want to rest it. Who'd they play last night?
The Pistons, and it was actually a close game. I got to give some credit to the Pistons. They're 500 and have a winning record in 2025.
They're no gimme.
No, they've won some good games.
Tough break for Jaden Ivey.
Yes.
But they're still playing well up in Detroit.
Absolutely.
And Ivy was having his best year.
Yeah, he was looking really good. Maybe it's a good thing that Steph's getting some rest. He did not have a good game last night. 2 for 14 from behind the arc.
Oh, my goodness.
Finished 5 for 21 overall. 17 points, was a minus 14, was Mr. Curry last night.
That is not good. And yet the Warriors still won the game.
They were able to pull it out by 3 against the Pistons.
So 36 minutes of basketball, he was minus 14.
Yep.
And that means in the other 12 minutes, they were, what'd they win by?
3.
So they were plus 17 in the other 12 minutes to overcome Steph Curry last night. Well, no wonder he's resting. He's probably benched. They just tried to save face for Steph Curry.
Yeah. Get some rest, buddy. Get that 3-pointer back.
You know what else? The Pacers got screwed in this, and I didn't even realize it.
What's up?
I just figured this out, that later this month, the Pacers are playing in the Paris series.
Yeah.
And you think, oh, what a nice honor to be able to go and represent the NBA over across the pond in Europe. And then you realize who their opponent is. Back-to-back games, they're taking on the Spurs. Oh, yeah, Victor Wembanyama is from France. Yeah. It's like a homecoming. The place will be crazy for Wembanyama.
It's going to be like a Spurs home crowd.
Oh, it's probably worse than going to San Antonio twice.
Probably. It's going to be nuts.
Yeah, and so you get to fly on a plane for, 6-7 hours at least?
Oh, yeah.
8 hours?
Mm-hmm.
And your reward is to basically play 2 road games against the San Antonio Spurs and Victor Wembanyama. Now, the Spurs aren't exactly one of the elite in the NBA, but, Wembanyama is such a difficult matchup
and they're
7'4", perimeter player. They're decent. They're like the Pistons.
Yeah, they're around there. They're 18-19 in the West, so, a formidable. They're a team that can beat the Pacers if they're not playing well.
Yeah, I mean, it's like I said, exactly like Detroit.
Yep.
Young team, still kind of on the build, and having maybe signs this year that they're trending in the right direction.
Have
they're
a
both
star
sitting
player,
in range of that 500 record. Might slip into a play-in position. And so the Pacers have to go and play. So they've got 2 against Cleveland. Now, that's a home and home. That's not going and playing 2 at Cleveland. That's going to Cleveland and coming back home and playing Cleveland. But then they have to go to Paris and play the Spurs twice. Tonight, the big game, Ohio State and Texas. All right, we've talked about it, so now we've got to make some picks. And I guess the big question is the Ohio State offense. Is it going to continue to click, or does the Ohio State offense that showed up for Michigan going to show up? Because I think they're going to need the Ohio State offense that we saw against Oregon. And I think when you look at the last matchups for both these teams, Texas against Arizona State, Ohio State against Oregon, there's no question that Ohio State played a much tougher opponent, and they won the game by a much larger amount. Of course, Texas got forced into overtime against Arizona State. So I feel so good that Ohio State's going to win this, and then we're going to have a national championship game, which is almost regional, Midwest, Heartland. You're going to have Notre Dame, Ohio State as the national championship game, which would also then hold true that Indiana finished 11-2, and the only 2 losses were the 2 teams playing for a national title, which if there's anything that has to validate Indiana's selection into the college football playoffs, that should be it, is that the only teams that were good enough to beat them were the 2 teams that beat everybody else in their path to the championship game. But I'm going to go, my pick for tonight is going to be Ohio State 34, Texas 27.
All right, I'm going to go a little bit lower. I'm going to go Ohio State 27, Texas 21.
Now, I was thinking going a little bigger margin, but then I thought, no, because I got burned on the bigger margin. Last night, I was so close. I had 27-20 or 20. I said 27-20 or 27-17. I said somewhere in that 27-16, somewhere in that range. And Penn State was given a touchdown on a pass interference call that really wasn't, I don't think.
No.
But the bottom line is I don't know if Notre Dame would have gotten the last field goal. So I did hit Notre Dame's number exact, but Penn State had basically one more score than I thought they would have. But I'll go ahead. I think tonight, nothing against either one of these teams' defenses. I just think There's too many playmakers. There's going to be plays that are made. And I think the other team then is going to have to go on the attack offensively, maybe more than they would if it was a 7-3 game. Mm-hmm. And because like last night, did you notice how that game opened up? It was a different game in the fourth quarter.
It was.
Very
different.
Yeah, you had the under bettors last night had to be like, hopefully they drank enough to not realize what happened in the fourth quarter. But it was 10-10 going into the fourth quarter. So an over-under of 45 or 44, somewhere in that neighborhood.
Good.
They only had 20 points through 3 quarters. You had to feel really good about your chances of hitting the under. That's why the under is such a tough bet. Even if you think it's under, because so many things can happen. Somebody fumbles and you get a scoop and score in the final minute or something. And that's what happened last night. All of a sudden the game just, became a shootout in the fourth quarter. But, Notre Dame awaits their foe, and that is tonight. Ohio State, Texas. Give us your thoughts on the final. You can text them to us at 260-447-8500. We're going to take a break. We're going to come back, put the wraps on this Friday edition, finish up the work week with the Sports Rush on 1380 The Fan and 100.9 FM.
Adam Lundy back with you a final time, wrapping up the Sports Rush with Brett Rump today on a Friday as the snow continues to fall out there around the Fort Wayne area. Everybody be safe as you're driving to and from wherever your destination may be tonight. Of course, keep in mind we do have complete coverage of the high school basketball game of the week brought to you by Parkview Sports Medicine tonight. It'll be the Southside Archers taking on the Homestead Spartans over at Homestead. Then after the game, stick tuned to the Parkview Sports Medicine high school basketball postgame show live from the Pizza Hut at Coventry as we give you an update on all of our area scores from tonight. Big thanks to Kyle Rowland from the Toledo Blade for joining us in the first hour, or in the second hour, as well as Justin Cohn of the Journal-Gazette, soon to be with Fort Wayne FC. This has been the Sports Rush on 1380 The Fan and 100.9 FM.